Our customers can compete with anyone when it comes to hyperscale and efficient hardware.
How do you lead that?
Number one reason the company fails is they don't get market transitions.
Absolutely. I think the industry is going through a tremendous transformation.
I'm excited to be here because I saw the product announcement, or the software announcement, really, actually. It's more software than hardware. Tell us about why people should care about that announcement.
So you're referring to AXOS, which is our new software platform, which we announced at our user group just a couple of weeks ago. It really comes down to the disruption that we're seeing in the industry, that we perceive around the cloud providers, the service providers, ultimately trying to provide services to the subscribers. And it goes sort of like this. It used to be that the service providers would look at each other, cable MSOs and wireline providers, and say, that's my primary competitor. I have to compete with them for the connection to the subscriber. It's evolved a little bit now with the addition of wireless devices to they have to compete not only for the pipe, but they also have to compete for that last connection.
Right.
But there's something very different happening, and you're seeing it with the cloud scale providers like an Amazon Web Services, who have DevOps environments, who can turn up services quite literally multiple times a day. The service provider models have always been doing things on a much longer, slower scale. And the challenge for them is speed. It's how can they be fast coming to the marketplace. And what AXOS does, first and foremost, is it changes the entire access infrastructure into a DevOps environment. You can do things quite literally in days. So if I were to say number one, that's the number one strategic tie-in.
As opposed to, make it live for me, how long is it taking to make those changes for a typical service provider today without this product?
Oh, well, traditionally, it's not just the service provider. We have a role in it too, because we've been building systems that are complex systems. They're threaded. And so when we build them, it takes us roughly 1.5 years to 2 years to add a new feature into an existing system.
Yeah.
Then the service provider takes it, tests it, brings it into their OSSs and BSSs, and it might be another 18 months to market. So the combined cycle might be as long as 3 or 4 years.
As opposed to an Amazon, which is doing it.
They're doing it in weeks. They run in an agile environment, and they're creating new things in weeks. And so what we've found with AXOS is because of the way it's architected, the fact that it's completely hardware independent, it's process oriented, not threaded.
Yeah.
It's stateful, so it knows what it's doing. It allows us to develop things very quickly, in weeks, quite literally, and if the customers will allow us, they'll be able to take their DevOps environment from their data centers and flow it right across the entire access infrastructure.
And where did the idea to do this come from? Was it inspired by web scale companies?
Boy, the idea started actually 10 years ago. We've been pursuing something that we called unified access. And inside the company, we've been trying to get to an access infrastructure that would be very fast, always on, and very simple to operate. And EXA, which was our previous operating system, got us part of the way down the path. It's a great operating system, but it wasn't abstracted because we didn't have the tools yet to take advantage of it. So to your point, a lot of the ideas we looked towards the data center to figure out what were they doing to start to create this development environment. And we picked from those things the things that we thought applied to access and built AXOS. It's been a 4.5 year undertaking now.
Yeah. I mean, you can, what is the term? You can lead the horse to water, but I mean, do service providers have the mindset where they can take advantage of the technology yet?
So I think you're seeing some service providers clearly start to look at their business models and say, we've got to change the speed at which we bring things to market. A few years back, you didn't hear that so much.
Right.
And I think even you at Light Reading, you started to see that happen with a lot of your commentary on what you're hearing from service providers. So we think this is coming and coming fast.
Right.
And we think there's actually a tipping point that's being driven by the service providers looking at their pipe competitors, but actually now starting to look more at the vertical competitors for value, the Amazons of this world, the Googles of this world, and others, as actually their primary competition for the value of the subscriber.
Does it help with AXOS, does it help with how you maintain and manage the network as well as how you deploy services across it?
Utterly.
Yeah.
So that same architecture that allows you to do things in days or weeks also has the benefits, if you will, of allowing containers to be changed instantly. So you're no longer dealing with maintenance windows, as an example, which has always been the bane of easy operation. So it's a very, very simple environment to function in. But also that containerization, that modularity, really gets you to the point where you can start to think about an always-on network. And let's face it, we're not dealing with phones coming over twisted pair, video coming over coax, and others. All services are coming over this internet connection.
Right.
And we can ill afford to have the network go down for any reason. The hardware has become increasingly reliable.
Yeah.
It's the software that has to catch up.
Yeah.
This software allows that pursuit to really be engaged full bore.
Help Light Reading's audience understand where AXOS fits in with the whole trend towards virtualization and NFV and SDN. Where do you sit in the network versus those technologies, and is there an interdependency, or do they just operate autonomously? Make that live for us if you can.
So they can operate autonomously. It fits natively, which is different than being made to look like. So it's not that it isn't SDN compatible, it is. It's not that it doesn't understand virtualized network functions or can take advantage of them, it does. But it does so natively. So let's take an example. Inside of AXOS, from that edge of the data center all the way over to the edge of the premises, you could move functions back and forth across AXOS as a customer, depending upon where you want to move them. Well, they can be virtualized all the way onto an x86 platform, and now all of a sudden that starts to sound like a virtualized network function.
Right.
And by the way, we could also take an open source virtualized network function and bring it across AXOS, and a customer could put it somewhere.
Right.
So it actually is an orthogonal complement to what's going on inside of the data center.
Right.
Native.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it does sound very cool. I mean, where is, stepping back a little bit from the details and the acronyms and the products, where is the market heading, big picture over the next 5 years, maybe even the next 10 years? What does the communications network look like? Should we even call it a network? Should we just call it a cloud in 10 years' time?
So great question. I think there's two different aspects of the network, and it's very easy to look at networks and assume they're all networks. The access infrastructure, because of the physical breakthroughs that are happening with NG-PON2, for example, you can start to look at the access network and really understand it's not a network anymore. It's actually a distribution environment. And what do I mean by that? In the data center environment, you have multiple data centers communicating with each other, and it's a network. I have A going to B, A going to C, C going to B, and that sort of an environment. As soon as you come to the access infrastructure, it's actually going out to the subscriber's device and back. So envision this. If you and I were standing next to each other and we're communicating, we're not communicating this way over our devices. You're communicating back into here and out to here. So that access part is literally a point-to-point type of infrastructure. Whereas when you go into the core, it's a fully networked infrastructure. So they're evolving differently at a network level.
Right.
But if you then go look at it from a service provider standpoint, right, you have a whole different shift going on that you see, where you have hyperscale cloud providers, but then you have service providers that are providing the actual connection and the services to the subscriber. And that's where the big grinding and chafing is going on right now.
We were talking before the interview, and we were sort of disagreeing a little bit about how ubiquitous network connectivity is, and I think we ended up agreeing that it depends on where you are in the world, really. But once we have some sort of level of bandwidth ubiquity for the entire population, that's going to completely change what the endpoint of the network looks like if you're moving around, for example. For example, if I'm traveling and I go to an office, I'm not going to be carrying a laptop, right? Because all of the compute cycles could be sitting in the network. If you take it to the extreme, maybe you could just have one server the size of a pyramid with its own gravity well, and all of the world's applications could run on it.
You've seen a set of device manufacturers, I think, recently say, the PC is dead. The notebook PC is dead. You just need a tablet, a flat screen.
But that does rely on that ubiquitous network, which is kind of what Calix's job is to to deliver that for the world. So I guess my question is, how close is that in North America? You might say we're already here.
We think it's a huge market opportunity. Clearly, in denser urban areas, you're already seeing that. I mean, if you turn on your phone, put on the Wi-Fi, and walk down the street, you're underneath someone's Wi-Fi umbrella constantly.
Yeah.
So you can see where it's going. I think it will still take a couple of decades to get to the point where you're ubiquitous for the most part around the world. And there are clearly huge areas that are underserved or unserved from a connectivity standpoint that have to be addressed.
All right. Good to see you, Carl.
Steve, great seeing you.
Thank you.